Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here. I have an admission to make. I'm going to wear two hats today. One, that of Space Generation Advisory Council, and second, that of the CEO, Istvan Arnocz, who is also a member of SGAC, except that he's also a CEO of Space Apps, which I will talk about. So my talk today will be divided in two parts. How many of you have heard of or know of Space Generation Advisory Council? Could you raise your hands? Okay, great. Thank you. Well, this idea of space generation is something that was actually conceived in the Third United Nations Conference on the exploration and peaceful uses of outer space. This was back in 1999 in Vienna. At that time, there were about 160 students and young professionals who were invited to contribute. And as a product of that, SGAC was founded to create, within the framework of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, a consultative mechanism to facilitate the continued participation of young people from all over the world, especially young people from developing countries and young women in cooperative space-related activities. The idea is getting a bunch of enthusiastic, volunteering students and young professionals in and having a passion for the space sector to come and make a difference, to connect with other top peers within the industry and various organizations, and in essence, to build the capacity as the next generation of space leaders. So in terms of network, we have a very wide reach. In fact, I don't think there's any other organization like us. We have over 6 regions, 100 countries, and over 4,000 members, and this number is actually growing. How we organized, pretty much like your usual organization. We have senior leadership, and then we have national points of contact, which I'm pretty sure there's one in every single country that's represented here in this room. And of course, we organize events. We have a permanent observer status, so I am very fortunate that this year I've been to Vienna about 2-3 times to sit on COPOS and the legal committee, subcommittee. And there we are also represented in other aspects. In terms of what we do, it's a lot. I'm just listing the main ones. So we have the Space Generation Congress, which was held a day before the IAS, in which the Australian government announced launching the space agency. We have Space Generation Fusion Forum, which is an annual US event. There are about 8 year-round projects, and that's just a guesstimate. So I'm part of the Space Law and Policy, which we look at asteroid mining. You have YGNSS, which looks at all aspects of that. And what is our role? So we basically cooperate with the UN and other space agencies in giving our input, as it were, from a younger generation's perspective. We also offer scholarships. In 2005, we offered about 114, and there are also other aspects, for example, taking part in other space workshops. I mentioned this year, so approximately about 130 of our delegates, over 50 countries spoke, and touching on all aspects of the space industry. That is just an outline of the students that have won scholarships. And then another summary of the event, and it's very well attended every single year. We have workshops, we have national events. The significance of it is, in essence, keeping each other in the know and tapping into. If you have a chance to look at our website, you will find that there are plenty of it. Now I'm going to wear my second hat, which is talking about space apps. So I met Istvan at UNOSA, actually, and like all good conferences and events, we start talking. So I said, what do you do? And he said, well, I am developing my own space application, which is in essence an online app. I want to help farmers through satellite imagery to better be able to use their resources and farm better, which is perfect for today's topic. And as a summary, by the way, these slides were created by him. I am just summarizing on his behalf. In essence, for him, 3 things. It's about monitoring, decision-making, and interaction between nature, between plants. And I guess it's the farmer who's the central focus. So how and why did he start, why did Istvan start a space startup? Well, it was founded only about a year ago, and actually, in fact, I met his team members at UNOSA, in other words, space enthusiasts, right? The feeling that, well, we've got nothing to lose and everything to win, so why don't we try? Of those members, most of them were from the Hungarian Astronautical Society and also with space background. My understanding was Istvan was motivated when he attended a European Space Generation workshop, and again I mentioned there's lots of these events that go around, talking about entrepreneurship in space. In fact, there's credit to ESA, because I understand that he also gained ESA funding. But all that, through education, through academia, through interaction with other youth, this idea slowly came about in terms of his business idea. Then I understand it was not until it was the European Space Solutions that it really started snowballing, and how his idea came about. So what does Space Apps do? So their idea is mainly a service for agricultural monitoring, as I mentioned before. It's great that we had the Sentinel video beforehand, because very much in essence, that's what he uses. Free services from Sentinel, and to tackle very simple, in other words, it's like your usual app. You have a taster experience, and then if you want an upgraded experience, then you have a paying service. Currently, since my last conversation with him yesterday, the way he's doing the pay for service is pretty much a tailored one. So the client, the farmer, would come to him and tell him exactly what he wants. And so for whatever service they pay for, it's pretty much tailored for. But it's under discussion right now. Now, moving on to the legal issues, which is probably of great interest to the audience. And we also already mentioned Planet Labs, is that of drones. So one of the issues that Istvan wanted to raise was, you know, as a startup, we know nothing about AI law. And in fact, we have no idea what the implications of using these drones are. And I think that's fair enough, because if we're going to look at the legal issues, might as well look at what is it like from the user's perspective. So even though they're users, they pretty much want to comply with the law as well. Part of the problem is they don't know, and probably we don't know either, or albeit that we're in the process of trying to figure out what it is. Data is also a huge one. I think it was also mentioned earlier in the Q&A previous section. And interesting, he also brought up the issue of advertisements. So, you know, advertising now is pretty much modernized. It's very much tailored to the user. It pops up when you least expect it, when you're watching a YouTube video, when you're just searching a Google, you know, to book your next flight, and then something else you think is relevant pops up, but actually, in fact, is very much relevant to your consumer behavior. So one of the concerns or questions he has is, well, how do we deal with that? You know, and the other one is land data. Now, this is a very interesting one, because in my conversation with him yesterday, he mentioned there are concerns if, for instance, you discover things about the land that you may not actually find from, say, a land registry, or you might find that there are other things on the land that might affect the property, the value of the property. Now, clearly, you know, he's touching on a gap, which is basically maybe the satellite imagery is not just imagery for precision farming. These imagery can actually be used for many other things. I think was also raised by one of the previous speakers. And what do we do with that? Where is the onus? If we see anything untoward, is there a need for investigation, and whose role it is? He also mentioned about data sharing. Currently, perhaps there is an unwillingness to share data. And at the same time, you know, what role does these data make? I think one of the people from the audience raised the issue of, you know, data being extracted or images being extracted then used for prosecution. Well, there's another question is, well, can such data or imagery be used as expert witnesses or used as expert evidence? And this is a huge question, because then, of course, if I think about litigation and the background to it, it depends on the jurisdiction, it depends on the procedure, it depends on how you gather it. And whether it's open source, because if it's open source, then in theory, anyone can just download it and find it. But if it's not, then we have to ensure that it's not tampered with and all that. So is this topic new? Well, according to Istvan, no. Old farmers planted every plant on site and had to make the decisions of whether, what to do with the plants on a daily basis. So this idea of having to make careful decisions based on the weather and the climate is not new. However, the change obviously is a progressive one. So we understand, since the 1990s, there's improved technologies that allowed better agriculture. And then, of course, introduction of chemicals, and then now this real need of precision farming. So one of the other topics that Istvan raised is this idea of AI, which I also touched upon, is, and we can also, I guess, come to this question of, can we trust the data which we're using? So for instance, I'll give you an example. My mum's side of the family are farmers, and they never had the use of this technology. And I remember stories about how people used to congratulate my mum on how good her yield was. Now, I'm going to speak to her and see what she thinks about precision farming through technology, because is it fair to say that once we have this AI or technology, farmers no longer have to basically use their skills. They could basically take a step back and say, relax, I don't have to worry so much and start counting the clouds or, whatnot. Or is it that it's simply a tool for farmers to better enhance the work they do? So in other words, they already anticipate that this patch of land is quite dry, probably needs a bit more soil, needs a bit more water, and the satellite imagery is simply to confirm their suspicions. Well, I think this is a question of how can we best use the technology that we have. And I think that is probably a separate conversation that we might want to have, but it's an interesting one because I think that leads on to other questions of, I suppose we've got ethics here, but I was thinking more in terms of liability. Let's assume I'm not a farmer, I download the imagery, I have a plot of land, and according to the instructions that were given to me or what I've been told I could do with the imagery is water my plants a certain way or and then it doesn't turn out the way I want it to be. So that's an interesting question. Is it the sort of liability responsibility purely on the user based on the data, or does some aspect of the supplier of the data or the data being available, is a potential source of a liable party? So here he puts down environmentally responsible, human first or planet first. And I guess this is a bigger question, more than just the satellites. I guess he's trying to think, okay, whatever we're doing or using with the satellites, is there an obligation? I guess if you see certain activities like illegal logging, you're farming, but suddenly in the imagery that you're using, you see other suspect activities. Do you have an obligation to report? Do you have an obligation to do anything other than use it for your own purpose? So in summary, what is good for the environment? Is what's good for the plants that we're going to grow equivalent to what's good for the environment? Is what we're going to be doing sustainable? Does it mean for using satellites, it would mean bigger, better, added value to the plants that are going to be grown? Whose land is it? I think that's it. Scanning my land. Scanning my land. Is it your land? Or is it those that didn't take photos of your land? Or is it going to be the chip that is contained in the satellite or in the drone? That's a very good question. And a land without history. I mentioned before my friend Istvan. He mentioned this concern about the consequence of land, and he was thinking specifically of, let's say, this plot of land. What happens when it's going to be sold to the market? Will the data saying it's a good plot of land, bad plot of land, a plot of land that can never grow anything, would that actually impact on the price of the property? Again, this is looking a bit further, but it has interesting, I guess, implications. And would AI destroy, I guess, part of the workforce on the farm? Understanding how nature works, looking at the clouds and looking at the plants and how it grows is a very niche field. Currently there's studies being done. Or is it that in the future everyone can potentially aspire to be, an urban farmer, as it were, and rely on a satellite imagery? So if I could sort of round it together now between space generation and space apps, is I wanted to say that Space Generation Advisory Council is going through a very fascinating field. Most of our alumni currently work in space agencies, including ESA, European Commission. And what I want to say is I'm also in the process of speaking to the leadership of trying to form an SGAC alumni so that people from the industry with greater experience could come on board as advisors, could come on board as other members, because I can see that the enthusiasm of space never dies. It simply just moves on into different aspects. In fact, you know, the longer the journey that we are in, the more enthusiasm that it is, particularly now with all the discussions that are happening. So these are the things that we currently do. We talk about the top issues in space. We award scholarships, so there's a huge educational element to what we do. We connect with employers, we build leadership skills. Unfortunately, the membership age is capped at 35. So that's why I'm pushing really hard to try and get an alumni going, because I think that it's a shame that we don't have that link when people leave school, leave university, and that there is a whole network out there, such as you guys here, sitting here, with all your expertise to tap into. So that's my email, and that's Istvan's email. He's more than happy to take any questions that you may have. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks.